The 446-pack and the 428 Cobra Jet were the engines that actually won the street wars of the late 60 seconds and early 70 seconds. While everyone obsesses over Hemis and Boss 429 seconds that barely anyone could afford, these two dominated every stoplight in America. But which one was really faster? The answer changes everything you thought you knew about the muscle car hierarchy. In 1968, Ford was getting embarrassed on the streets. Their 390s and 428s were making decent power, but getting stomped by 440 Mopars every Saturday night. So Ford's engineers did something brilliant. They took their pedestrian 428, lied about the horsepower, and created the Cobra Jet. Meanwhile, Chrysler looked at their already dominant 440 and said, "Let's add 2 more carburetors and really piss everyone off." What happened next was the greatest affordable muscle car battle in automotive history. Let's get one thing straight right away. Both manufacturers were completely full of shit about the power ratings. Ford claimed the 428 Cobra Jet made 335 horsepower. Chrysler said the 446-pack made 390. These numbers were about as accurate as a politician's campaign promises. The real numbers? Hot Rod magazine Dyno tested a stock 428 Cobra Jet in 1969 and recorded 410 horsepower at the flywheel. The 446-pack? Same magazine, same dyno, 425 horsepower. But here's where it gets interesting. Those numbers don't tell the whole story. Not even close. The 428 Cobra Jet was Ford's masterclass in deception. They started with their regular 428, which was basically a truck engine. Big bore, short stroke, designed for torque, not revs. But the Cobra Jet version got the good stuff. 427 low-riser heads with bigger valves, a 735 cubic feet per minute Holley 4-barrel, and most importantly, a camshaft that turned this thing into a completely different animal. The cam specs were 270 degrees duration intake, 290 exhaust, with 0.481 inches of lift. That asymmetrical profile was the secret sauce. It gave the engine a split personality, docile below 3,000 rounds per minute, absolutely violent above 4,000. Ford also threw in stronger rods, a nodular iron crank, and an aluminum intake that was basically stolen from their 427 race program. The 446-pack took a different approach. Chrysler started with their already legendary 440 Magnum, an engine that was destroying everything in its path with just a single 4-barrel. Then, they bolted on an aluminum intake with 3 Holley 2-barrel carburetors. The center carb handled normal driving, stepped into it hard, and the 2 outboard carbs opened up through a progressive linkage, dumping 1,350 cubic feet per minute of fuel and air into that massive 440. But the 6-pack wasn't just about carburetors. It got a hotter cam with 268 degrees intake, 284 degrees exhaust duration. The heads were essentially the same as the single 4-barrel 440, but the valve train was beefed up to handle the extra rounds per minute, heavy-duty valve springs, hardened push rods, and double roller timing chain. This thing was built to be beaten on. The first real showdown between these engines happened at US 30 Dragway in late 1968. A brand new Dodge Super Bee with the fresh 446-pack lined up against a Ford Fairlane Cobra with the 428 Cobra Jet. Both cars had 4 speeds, both had 3.91 gears, both had experienced drivers who knew how to launch. The Fairlane got the jump. The 428 Cobra Jet's massive low-end torque, 445 pound-feet at just 2,800 rounds per minute, launched the Ford like it was shot from a cannon. First gear was over in 2.1 seconds. The Speedo swept past 60 miles per hour in 6.1 seconds. Meanwhile, the Super Bee was fighting wheel spin. Those 3 carburetors were dumping so much fuel that the rear tires were going up in smoke. But by the time they hit third gear, everything changed. The 440's extra displacement and those 3 carburetors started to work their magic. The 6-pack pulled like a freight train from 4,000 to 5,500 rounds per minute. It reeled in the Fairlane and passed it just before the finish line. Final times: Super Bee 13.68 at 105.1 miles per hour. Fairlane Cobra 13.74 at 104.3 miles per hour. But weight was everything in this battle. The 428 Cobra Jet powered a huge variety of Ford products, from lightweight Mustangs to heavyweight Torinos. The lightest factory 428 Cobra Jet was a stripped 1968 Mustang Fastback that weighed just 3,200 pounds. The heaviest 440 six-pack car was a Plymouth GTX that tipped the scales at nearly 4,000 pounds. When you put the 428 Cobra Jet in a lightweight Mustang, magic happened. Car and Driver tested a 1968 Mustang Cobra Jet with the drag pack, 3.91 gears, and a Detroit locker. It ran 13.56 at 106.64 miles per hour. Those are supercar numbers for 1968, and this was a car you could finance at your local Ford dealer for $3,500. The 440 six-pack had its own lightweight special, the A12 package available on the Roadrunner and Super B. These cars got fiberglass hoods with that iconic scoop, aluminum intake, and most importantly, a warranty that covered racing. Chrysler literally told customers, "Go race this thing, we'll still fix it if it breaks." Superstock magazine got their hands on an A12 Roadrunner and ran 13.34 at 107.5 miles per hour on street tires. With slicks, which were technically allowed under warranty, the same car ran 12.91 at 111.8 miles per hour. That's faster than a Hemi, faster than a Boss 429, faster than almost anything you could buy in 1969. Track conditions made a huge difference in this rivalry. The 428 Cobra Jet loved cool, dry air. The engine's relatively small, 428 cubic inches, meant it was sensitive to atmospheric conditions. On a cool October night, a Cobra Jet could run a full half-second quicker than on a hot August afternoon. The 440 six-pack didn't care as much about weather. Those 440 cubic inches and 3 carburetors could power through hot, humid air that would choke a Cobra Jet. Racers in the South quickly learned that the six-pack was the more consistent performer when the temperature hit 90 degrees and the humidity was thick enough to swim through. Let's talk about the driving experience, because quarter-mile times don't tell you what it was like to live with these engines. The 428 Cobra Jet was surprisingly civilized. That single 4-barrel meant smooth power delivery. The hydraulic cam meant no valve adjustments. You could drive a Cobra Jet to work every day and never foul a plug. It even got decent gas mileage for a big block. The 440 six-pack was a different animal entirely. When those outboard carburetors opened, it was like someone hit a nitrous switch. The surge of power was addictive, but also unpredictable. In the rain, a six-pack car was basically undrivable. The progressive linkage meant that power delivery was either on or off, with not much in between. And fuel economy? Single digits if you were lucky. Ford and Chrysler both had secret weapons they'd sell you if you knew what to ask for. Ford offered the Super Cobra Jet version of the 428. Basically the same engine, but with forged pistons, stronger rods, and an oil cooler. It was required if you ordered 3.9, 1 or 4.3 gears, and it was virtually indestructible. Dyno tests showed the Super Cobra Jet made about 20 more horsepower than the standard Cobra Jet. Chrysler's direct connection program offered the 6-barrel kit, essentially the same 3 2-barrel setup, but with different carburetors that had mechanical secondaries instead of vacuum. This setup flowed 1,450 cubic feet per minute and added about 30 horsepower. They'd also sell you a cam that was basically identical to the Hemi grind. Bolt all this on a 440, and you had a legitimate 500 horsepower engine for about $500 in parts. The magazine racing wars between these engines were legendary. Every publication had different results depending on the cars they tested, the drivers they used, and the tracks they visited. But when you averaged them all out, a pattern emerged. In pure stock form, the 440 six-pack was generally about 1 to 2/10 quicker in the quarter mile and 1 to 2 miles per hour faster through the traps. But the 428 Cobra Jet was more consistent, easier to launch, and quicker to 60 miles per hour. The Ford also responded better to basic modifications. Just adding headers and rejetting the carb could drop 3/10 off your ET. Professional racers knew both engines had way more in them than the factory delivered. Dick Brannon's 428 Cobra Jet Ranchero ran 11.62 at 119 miles per hour, with nothing but headers, slicks, and careful tuning. That's with a car that weighed 3,800 pounds. The engine was completely stock internally. Meanwhile, Sox and Martin campaigned several 440 six-pack cars with similar modifications, headers, slicks, and blueprinting. Their best was an A12 Roadrunner that ran 11.45 at 121 miles per hour, again completely stock internally. These weren't race engines. They were stock engines driven by people who knew how to extract every bit of performance. Price was a huge factor in this battle. A 428 Cobra Jet Mustang started at $3,588 in 1968. A 446-pack Roadrunner cost $3,893 in 1969. For context, a base model Corvette cost $4,663. You could literally buy a Cobra Jet Mustang, race it every weekend, and still have money left over, compared to buying a Corvette that would get destroyed by either of these cars. Insurance companies hadn't figured out what these engines were capable of yet. A 5-year-old could insure a 428 Cobra Jet for about $400 a year in 1969. By 1970, when the insurance companies saw the accident and racing statistics, that same policy jumped to $1,200. The party ended fast. Both engines had relatively short production runs. The 428 Cobra Jet lasted from mid-1968 through 1970. Ford built approximately 20,000 Cobra Jet-powered vehicles across all models. The 446-pack ran from 1969 to 1971, with roughly 15,000 built. By 1972, both were gone, killed by emissions regulations and insurance costs. But their influence lasted decades. The 428 Cobra Jet proved that Ford could build a street dominator without exotic overhead cam designs or massive displacement. It showed that careful engineering could beat brute force. The 446-pack demonstrated that there was no replacement for displacement when you added proper breathing. It set the template for every multi-carb setup that followed. Today, these engines are more valuable than ever. A numbers-matching 428 Cobra Jet Mustang can sell for $100,000 to $150,000. A 446-pack CUDA might fetch even more. But here's the beautiful thing. You can still build either engine from readily available parts for under $10,000. The 428 FE block is still in production. 442s are plentiful in junkyards. The dream of affordable massive power lives on. The street racing veterans who lived through this era will tell you the truth. It usually came down to the driver and the specific night. A good Cobra Jet driver could beat an average six-pack driver. On a cool night, the Ford had the advantage. On a hot night, the Mopar was king. Both engines were so close in performance that a shift missed by 1/10 of a second determined the winner. So which was really better? The 428 Cobra Jet was the smarter choice. More refined, easier to live with, cheaper to buy, better fuel economy. It was the thinking man's muscle car engine. The 446-pack was the emotional choice. More brutal, more theatrical, more likely to get you in trouble. It was the engine for someone who wanted everyone to know they had the baddest car on the street. In the end, both engines achieved exactly what they were designed to do: give regular people extraordinary performance at a price they could afford. These weren't exotic, limited production specials. These were blue-collar supercars that guys bought with overtime pay and raced on Saturday night. The 428 Cobra Jet and 446-pack represented the democratic ideal of American performance. Massive power for the masses. The fact that we're still arguing about which was better 50 years later tells you everything. They were both right. They were both wrong. They were both absolutely perfect for what they were. And they gave us the greatest era of affordable performance the world has ever seen.